I'm thinking a wee bit about immigration more this week than perhaps I have in the last couple of weeks, specifically due to the meeting in the Shankill Road the other night, and also thinking of a report that was published by Professor Matt Goodwin 2 days ago, that was published in the Times newspaper, who said that with his research he reckoned that by the end of the century whites would be in the minority in the United Kingdom. The figure of whites in the UK probably stands at 73% today. That would be reduced to 57% by 2050, in around 57%. And that sort of means that a child born today, by the time they reach 25, would be on the verge of being a minority ethnic in the United Kingdom. At current rates, the UK are bringing in approximately 900,000 immigrants per year. That's a city the size of Birmingham coming into the United Kingdom every single year. That figure over the last 10 years had been steadily sitting at about 300,000 per year. 300,000 per year, and that's now 900,000 coming in over the last year. So what does that mean for us? What does that mean in the streets? What does that mean for housing? What does that mean for the economy? And when it boils down to it, what does it mean for the Shankill Road? Well, we've already seen immigration coming into the Shankill Road. We've seen issues that comes with it. We've seen issues with migrants coming in who have a different sense of values, who have a different sense of law and order. We've seen the guy walking the length of Boyd Street exposing himself, which shocked people. We've seen the guy at the end of Canmore Street exposing himself, which shocked people. We've heard similar stories in other places in the Shankill of antisocial behaviour, of basically being bad neighbours. And also we look at the housing strain that causes as well. Now the Belfast agenda, you may or may not have heard of it, is a plan to bring in 66,000 new citizens into the city, not into Northern Ireland, but into Belfast by 2035. 66,000 people into Belfast by 2035. And you think of how that will be a dramatic change, that will be a swift change in culture, in values, in traditions, in areas overnight. Now we've seen that in places before where such a dramatic change in a population shift, because believe it or not, going back to the time of the Ulster Covenant, Belfast only had a 20% nationalist population. And as that increased, and as areas like the Antrim Road, the demographics changed, and the Antrim Road went from being a unionist Protestant area to a Catholic nationalist area, how that played into parading, for example, and traditions in the area, and how it brought tensions. And such a fast and dramatic change in the population does bring those difficulties. And when you think then that there's going to be difficulties going ahead, what's the city going to look like? And a lot of the solution that seems to be coming from Belfast City Council is inner city redevelopment. So you're going to see a lot more tower blocks. An example, I know one of the sites that has been earmarked is at Smithfield Market, and they're going to be putting a lot of tower blocks there, where they say there'll be no parking facilities because people who live in the inner city don't need to park. They don't need a car because they live close to all the amenities. And you can think of even something as simple as parking strain then, pushing into Brown Square and pushing up the Shankill, simple things such as that. It also puts strain on schools. We had issues where school places come up for grabs and a school becomes ending up at maximum capacity. The government does try to help some of those schools by making grants available for migrant students coming in. So to take the strain and to help kids bed into local schools better, they're given priority uniforms, free school bags, free equipment for school. And that then causes resentment among locals as well, because Shankill Road is still one of the most deprived areas in Northern Ireland, and it has to be a common playing field for all. But we also see then a stress on housing. I'm representing today girls in their 30s and 40s, and I'll be honest with you, it breaks my heart that I can't help them. They come to you and they ask, can I have a house? I've got 2 kids, and I'm in my 30s and I'm living with my parents, and they've got no home in an area that their parents and grandparents built, that they were born into, and they can't get a home. Now there's people like Peter Shirlow out there, a professor from Liverpool, who will tell you that there is no real migration, that net migration is in exceedingly low figures. Well, if he comes and he gets housing for all the local people that I'm struggling to get a house for, I'd be exceptionally thankful. And I can take you to areas where there's a population shift in and around the Woodvale, where my parents live, where the streets become 20, 30, 40% migrant. And that is not to say that we're against migrants. That's to say that we're taking them in faster than the sponge can soak them up. And that's what's causing the problem. We're not building enough houses to accommodate our local people. The issues around migrants' behaviour, I know local people can behave equally bad, but there seems to be a disproportionate number of complaints about some of the migrants who are being housed in the Shankill. And at the meeting with the police the other night, the police at one point, and I stand to be corrected on this if anybody who has stuck this video this long can remember it, said that there was only 2 people available, 2 police individuals available at that time. So the police said they're under-resourced, and they said that help isn't coming. And I suppose if anything came out of the meeting, then we know where we stand with regards to resources being made available. But it also begs the question then that if you divide the city into quarters and 15,000 of those new migrants come into West Belfast, well, how many more police are we going to get? Are we going to get another 1 or 2? If that's a proportional number of the 25,000, 30,000 that live in the Shankill, we're going to get another 1 or 2 police officers. That's not going to police the difficulties that's coming our way. And so we see that it manifests itself in different ways too. So you then have houses being targeted when they become vacant, and it's written on it local houses for local people. And that's a perfectly legitimate request, is that your daughter, who you worked for and lived in the Shankill all your days, and you want her to live in the area that she's been growing up in, that's a legitimate concern. And then it manifests itself in frustration when people then do target homes in the area because their own family members can't get housed in the area that they're from. It also brings strain. So are we bringing in quality immigration? Are we bringing in the sort of individuals that are going to be doctors in the Royal, that are going to be dentists, that are going to be school teachers? I've been involved a wee bit this week as on 2 board of governors for schools, and they're finding it difficult to get the right candidates for the school. The school populations are going to increase. Are we going to get equal number of teachers and that to go with it? Now, you say, what can we do about all of this? Because ultimately, the Westminster government are responsible for immigration, and everybody would agree that the Westminster government is responsible for that. But there's local responsibility too. The Stormont government, the Executive Office, manage the immigration issue on behalf of Westminster. It's Stormont who sets the housing policy, who are in charge of the housing executive, and it's Stormont who are in charge of the police. Now, when the police say they've no budget and they only have 6, 8 or 10 officers in a particular area at a particular time, then what we hear is that they need £200 million. This is a Stormont that can fund Irish language and Casement Park to the tune of hundreds of millions of pounds with a blank cheque. And yet we can't afford to put police officers on the street in an issue of community safety. Our community doesn't feel safe. Our community doesn't feel in control of its own affairs, and it's the elephant in the room. And I think that immigration for TUV and for myself is going to be one of the biggest issues for the next couple of years. So that's just my thoughts on immigration. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right, but I think that's where we're at the minute.